The way I see it, our fates appear to be intertwined. In a land brimming with hollows, could that really be mere chance? So what do you say? Why not help one another on this lonely journey? We are amidst strange beings in a strange land. The flow of time itself is convoluted, with heroes centuries old phasing in and out. The very fabric wavers, and relations shift and obscure. There's no telling how much longer your world and mine will remain in contact. But use this to summon one another as spirits, cross the gaps between the worlds, and engage in jolly cooperation. Philia is one of the ancient Greek words for love. It denotes a bond of friendship, specifically one absent of biological impulses, at least initially, and could be fairly deemed the least natural form of loving someone. It's a freely chosen love, as opposed to storge and its inbuilt affection, or eros and its cascading hormonal wants. And it's more practical than agape and its far-off idealism. It isn't required for reproduction, not in any significant way, which is interesting for a concept that appears throughout the entirety of human history as virtuous. By all rights, it's a social behavior that should have been long bred out of us tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years ago. It's neither entirely positive or incorruptible. I'd venture to say no aspect of human nature is free of that dualism, and is as much the foundation for authentic, meaningful friendship, as it is the gateway for exclusionism, malcontent, and shared conceit. To clarify, by authentic, meaningful friendship, I don't mean what we know as friends. In fact, so far have we debased the value of friendship that what we now consider friends falls so balefully short of conveying the meaning of philia that to extract it from the current definitions of love and friendship is something that takes considerable effort. For love, what we currently refer to as love, the neurochemical dump of oxytocin and estrogen, vasopressin and testosterone, and the subsequent emotional turmoil of two people trying to figure out how they fit into each other's lives, was considered something between a pleasurable but fleeting high and abject madness for most of human history. It's a neutral force of desire, the sort of thing that blurs the lines between pleasurable romantic bonding and shackling together mutual tormentors, often bearing significant warnings against giving oneself over to it. Think of it like water. It is neither good nor evil, and as capable of slaking your thirst as it is of drowning you. And as a general rule, when you want something to drink, you don't go leaping from the nearest waterfall head first to get it. And you certainly shouldn't be rewarded for surviving that attempt. Today, it seems to be either an all-encompassing force of good and only good, or just chemicals in your brain. While the former is obvious in its destructive capacity of lofting love into something it is not and should never be, the latter has also done precious little good and nearly as much harm as any other form of deconstruction. The sun is just helium and hydrogen. Getting sick is just bacteria and viruses. Suicide is just another senseless tragedy. No emergent property when fusing hydrogen to helium, no additional facet in illness, no cause for a man taking his own life. Reducing anything down to and beyond its component parts like this is as lethal to knowledge as academic overcomplication. Now, even to discuss that love is more than just chemicals and less than an omnipotent divinity invites criticism of semantics and nuance. It's being asked to describe a car and then being accused of nuance for pointing out that it has both an engine and wheels, but also isn't an airplane. Even beyond this, the ubiquitous feminist dogma of love has subsumed all forms of affection into a dualism of what is arguably eros for the woman and agape for the man, which is to say she's allowed to give herself entirely over to self-destructive phallic worship, and to suggest that this is either destructive or fanatical is an unforgivable sin, while he must give of himself unconditionally and only unconditionally. Anything less is neglect or abuse or hatred. Laws have been drafted by the light of this lunacy. And while women's self-adulation continues to gleefully scourge humanity from men, the counterculture response has been love is a neurochemical dump and can be safely disregarded accordingly. This has excelled at both doing absolutely fuck all to quell the stripping of rights from men, and actively aiding and stripping them of support and friendship. Every relationship and all subsequent emotion and emergent behavior has been ground down to a byproduct of familiarity, similarity, and time, or religion. For men particularly, friendship can't be more than these precepts. It cannot possess preferentialism, self-sacrifice, platonic affection, much less active behaviors, keeping in contact, conflict resolution, sharing personal histories, mutual protectiveness. These qualities will be sexualized, particularly often by women. For that matter, nearly all qualities and all absences of rational behavior have been sexualized, again, peculiarly often by women. "Excuse me, miss, do you have the time?" is a lascivious confession of lust. Passing her by without a glance is a condemnation of her sexual worth whole cloth. The ancient forms of love and the countably infinite human behaviors that we once understood stem from or are foundational to them have been lost to the pointedly female singularity of sex, and our understanding of basic human interaction has ultimately diminished for it. Pointedly female is not a value judgment, either. It's an observation of who appears to be at the forefront of what philosophers once saw as the corruptive dark element of love's forms. These forms are not neatly separated and often incur significant overlap, but that does not make them interchangeable, much less unified. Storge, for example, is, or was, considered the most natural form of love. It's the biological affection with the least attention paid to discriminating factors or even with clear reasoning. Think of the love a parent has for their child, or the familiar comfort of a family friend, or someone who you just share similarities with. It often serves as the framework of many forms of attachment, but is distinctly non-sexual in and of itself. On the other hand, because it comes so naturally, it can infer a sense of possession, opens doors to jealousy and smothering. At its worst, it invites entitlement, the expectation that such a natural instinct will continue in spite of your behavior. Who, I wonder, stands at the fore of warping love for their children into parentification and sexualization? Who demands unwavering affection despite their own pleasantness? Who uses smothering and ambivalence and love bombing? Who does these things most? Eros, I've already given you most of the particulars of. That sense of free falling into want, the willful giving over of yourself to the chemical urge of lust and possessiveness and desire, the worship of Venus. Who stands at the front of this blind religious obsession with self-gratification, rewarding their partners for pursuing the pleasure of them, and of course, nothing more than the pleasure of them, punishing them for expecting more and infesting all other potential forms of love with sexuality? Agape would be the transcendental ideal of love. It's not realistically attainable, but it serves as part of man's pursuit of virtue, encourages things like patience and clemency and goodwill. The dark heart of this is that it bears a notable capacity to justify authoritarianism or otherwise commit clear harm to someone in pursuit of good intentions. Who stands at the fore of perverting this into the expected default for how others should treat them? Who punishes their spouses and their own children for faltering in selflessness? Who claims to be the more empathetic and caring on the one hand, and blithely destroys lives with the other? Philia is the realm of friendships, the sort that require a mutual ongoing work of all parties involved. It compels conflict resolution, legitimate conflict resolution, a lost art. It involves significant investment of time and words handled discreetly and privately, where both parties actually lay down whatever burden they bear over it, in good conscience and for good. Its foundation is trust, and therefore that trust cannot be foundless, So it initially incurs this uncomfortable assurance of mutual destruction until you kind of mitigate away the risk of betrayal. It is a love of someone's character and a cultivation of your own, a pursuit of self-love and happiness that denies viciousness and solicits forbearance in yourself and those around you. It requires self-discovery, an internal validation, not of yourself, but also of those who you are friends with. How can a man rightly love of you who you are if he does not know nor love himself? It's plain to see why friendship, this magnitude of friendship, has been devalued and tied to sexuality, used in marriage conferences, issued in relationship advice. To suggest that it's a lost art for women is to suggest it's an art they learned in the first place. The lie, gentlemen, is that this is how you should treat women, when it's how you should be treating each other. It's how you should be treating yourself. Solaire, seeking his own son, is of no use to rampant female nature. He has a path that he cannot be deterred from, and lights his way with an internal blaze that can't be snuffed out. He freely lights the trembling, outstretched candles of men who have no flame of their own, and tries to convince them to find their path, their sun, to put behind begging after the guttering rushlights of others. What does it matter then that he lives or dies? Better is it that he has no friends to look out for his well-being. He's robbing those friends of time better spent pursuing women. What is he, gay? Does he hate women? Who hurt him? All the better that men go without knowing Solaire, that they don't encounter him until far down the path, when solitude and directionlessness have driven him into an unrecognizable shell for them to disregard, if not cut down. All the better he isn't able to teach others to seek their own sun, light their own flame, build it into a lantern that cannot be extinguished, that he can't share his light with others while they find their own way. Sever the dark from the light, the sexual from the non-sexual, show them mutual respect and reciprocal love, while giving as much or more than they offer looks like. He is a beacon that reveals false gods and empty promises, hiding behind the pageant of romantic love. And by that quality alone, should any capacity for other men to do the same be shamed and beaten and belittled out of them, lest they commit the ultimate sin of interrupting a woman's sloven, unquenchable self-worship. What if they all get it into their heads to seek their own sun, to light their own bonfires, to protect their ember with a lantern, so it can't be extinguished by the breath of a woman's disapproval? What if they shared their light with boys? Show them compassion, teach them self-worth, much less that intimacy and intercourse are not the same thing, and anyone who insists that they are may well be trying to take advantage of them. What if men see the light of their brothers? What if men see the sun, and the pale, tepid flame of women is no longer needed to light their way? What if, when a man loses his sun and can no longer see his way, it isn't a woman that he needs to hold out a flame for him and guide him in the direction that she wishes to go, but another man to build a fire with him, sit beside it for a while, let him rest, and teach him how to kindle his own embers? How much greater would their jolly cooperation be, with each bearing his own light? Praise the sun.